All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of Ling-Fen Wang. Have you heard of him?
I have, yeah. He's the founder of DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, yeah, and they're this AI company that's been making some serious waves lately, actually, like even causing like $1 trillion stock market dip.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So we've got excerpts from a video essay all about Ling-Fen Wang and DeepSeek, and what I'm really curious about is how this guy, started from basically nothing in rural China and is now shaking up Silicon Valley's AI scene. That's a wild story.
Yeah, the thing about DeepSeek that's so fascinating is they're achieving results that are comparable to, even sometimes better than giants like OpenAI, but they're doing it on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
It's a real underdog story.
Yeah, totally. So let's rewind all the way back to the beginning picture. A tiny village in China, as far from Silicon Valley as you can imagine, and that's where Ling-Fen Wang's story starts. He was born in 1985. His parents were both primary school teachers in Guangdong province. And this was a time when China was really starting to embrace capitalism, so there was this energy of entrepreneurship kind of all around.
Yeah, that environment must have had a huge impact on shaping his journey, surrounded by people starting businesses, plus his parents valuing education. It's like the perfect recipe for ambition.
It really is. And Ling was definitely ambitious even as a kid. He was like a math whiz, which turns out to be pretty important later on. And he ends up at Xiang University, which is like this major pipeline for tech talent in China.
Yeah.
Companies like Alibaba recruit heavily from there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he studies electronic information engineering, which seems like a pretty standard path, right?
Yeah, it does seem like a typical start.
Yeah, but then 2007 hits the financial crisis.
Right.
And while most people saw disaster, Ling saw an opportunity.
Interesting.
He wasn't afraid of it. He was excited by the possibilities.
Huh.
So instead of panicking, he thought, hey, maybe I can use AI to predict what's going to happen in the markets.
Cool.
So he gets a group of classmates together. They dive into machine learning and get this. They start finding patterns that human traders were missing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And this early success in finance, it really foreshadows his achievements with DeepSeek. It shows his talent for spotting opportunities in chaos, which, let's face it, the financial markets often are.
Yeah, definitely.
So it was a huge turning point for him. He realized the practical power of AI, and honestly, it made him a good chunk of money, too. But remember, Ling was an academic at heart, so he goes back to university, gets his master's degree in information and communication engineering, and his dissertation, get this, it was on tracking objects using cheap cameras.
So this is key because it shows his interest in making powerful technology accessible, which pops up again later with DeepSeek's open source approach. He wasn't just interested in the tech itself. He wanted to see it used widely.
You're spot on, that idea of democratizing technology, making it available to everyone. That's a recurring thing with Ling. And after graduating, he really honed his skills in automated stock trading. First freelancing, then teaming up with his college buddies. But he wasn't content just being part of the system. He wanted to change it. So at 30, he starts his own hedge fund.
Wow.
And that's where his unusual approach to AI really starts to take shape in 2015. He starts using deep learning models in live trading, and deep learning basically uses these complex algorithms inspired by the human brain to analyze huge amounts of data. It was cutting edge at the time, and using it for financial trading was unheard of. He was so ahead of the curve, it's amazing. He wasn't just following trends, he was creating them. And his hedge fund, which he called a High Flyer, absolutely thrived because of this unique AI-driven strategy. They even got rid of human portfolio managers altogether.
Wow.
Yeah, High Flyer became one of the top quantitative analysis firms in China, managing billions. And then in a move that shocked everyone, Ling walked away.
Really?
Yeah, he left.
That's crazy.
I know he essentially left a fortune on the table to chase a dream, and not just any dream, AGI, artificial general intelligence.
Right.
This is about creating AI that can perform any intellectual task that a human can. Basically a synthetic human mind. And this is 2023, and back then most people thought only tech giants with tons of money could even try for AGI.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then Ling does something totally unexpected. He starts buying up thousands of NVIDIA A100 GPUs. These are specialized computer chips essential for AI development.
Oh, right?
Yeah, and people thought he was crazy, but he knew what he was doing. This was the beginning of his personal AI hobby, a dedicated research lab focused on pushing the limits of artificial intelligence.
Fascinating.
Then things took a turn. President Biden restricted the sale of these GPUs to China.
Oh, wow.
You'd think that would be game over for Ling, right?
For most people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not for him. Instead of giving up, he saw it as a challenge. He completely overhauled his training processes to use fewer GPUs.
Yeah.
Talk about turning a setback into a strength.
Unbelievable. So this AI hobby eventually becomes DeepSeek, and it's a company built on this idea of being like a pure research hub.
Yeah.
No outside funding, no plans to turn it into a commercial product, you know?
Interesting.
They were in it for the science, for pushing AI forward.
And that's where the contrast with Silicon Valley really comes in. DeepSeek with its research focus and non-commercial approach, it's the opposite of the profit-driven mindset of most U.S. tech companies.
It's almost like he was saying, hey, Silicon Valley, you think you're the only ones who can innovate? Think again.
Right.
It's such a bold move.
It really is. And what's ironic is that DeepSeek gets accused of stealing intellectual property from companies like OpenAI,
right?
Which, as the essay points out, built their own models by scraping data from the entire internet.
Yeah.
It's a bit hypocritical, don't you think?
Totally agree. But hypocrisy aside, Lang was clearly inspired by the U.S. In some ways, he even calls America China's teachers in AI development. But at the same time, he's rejecting the typical Silicon Valley way of doing things. He's this quiet, almost reclusive figure, especially compared to the loud, very public CEOs we see in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, there's a quote from a rival fund manager in the essay that really stood out to me. They said that Ling can be very talkative when he's engaged, but he can also go completely silent when he's thinking.
Yeah.
This quiet, introspective nature seems to be a big part of who he is.
He's like a chess grandmaster, always thinking several moves ahead. And speaking of different approaches, DeepSeek's structure is fascinating. Instead of a top-down hierarchy, they're built from the bottom up. And get this, Ling intentionally hires bookworms, people who are super passionate about AI, but don't necessarily have traditional tech backgrounds.
That's so interesting.
It's another example of Ling challenging the status quo. He believes that experts can get stuck in their ways too, attached to old ideas by bringing in fresh perspectives. He's creating a culture of creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. It's like he's building a team of passionate amateurs to take on the world's best professionals, and, it's working. Then there's the whole open source versus closed source debate. OpenAI, after starting as open source, they switched to a closed model, saying they needed to prevent AI from falling into the wrong hands.
Right.
DeepSeek, on the other hand, is all about open source development.
Ling believes that open source encourages collaboration and speeds up progress. It's a much more community-driven approach, which fits with his vision of making powerful AI accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and he even says that being followed, having others build upon your work, is rewarding for technologists. There's a sense of pride in contributing to the collective advancement of the field.
That's a really interesting perspective.
It's almost like he sees this as a global effort, not a race to be won by a single company or country, and this connects to his bigger goal for China to become a driver of core tech innovation, not just a beneficiary of others' advancements.
He specifically criticizes the tendency of Chinese companies to simply profit from existing Western technologies without contributing anything truly new.
Right.
It's a call for China to step up and play a more active role in shaping the future of technology.
But let's be real, this open source approach could easily be taken advantage of, right? What's stopping U.S. companies from taking DeepSeek's innovations and using them for their own closed source models?
That's a valid point, however. If we believe what Lang says, profit isn't his main motivation. He's laser focused on innovation, particularly Chinese innovation. It seems he's willing to take the risk of others benefiting from his work if it ultimately advances the field as a whole and elevates China's position in the AI landscape.
It's a bold strategy for sure. And speaking of bold, we can't forget the impact DeepSeek has had on the world. Their release caused a $1 trillion stock market meltdown and sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley.
It's true.
And they did it all with a fraction of the budget of their U.S. counterparts.
This really highlights DeepSeek's disruptive potential. It's a wake-up call to the established players that innovation can come from anywhere, and that clinging to traditional models of development and profit-seeking might ultimately be their downfall.
And just when you think things can't get any more interesting, the Chinese government gets involved. They appoint Ling as China's AI leader.
Wow.
We're talking top-level recognition here, his first assignment. A high-profile meeting with Li Qiang, who reports directly to Xi Jinping himself.
This is where things get more complicated.
Yeah.
Ling's vision of open source collaboration and China's rise as a tech innovator, it intersects with the geopolitical realities of U.S.-China competition.
Right.
His appointment raises questions about the extent to which DeepSeek's technology will be leveraged for national interests, potentially, including military applications.
It's kind of like what's happening with Google and OpenAI now too, right? They're starting to work more closely with governments on AI for defense. It's a really complex situation with huge potential consequences.
Definitely. And the essay mentions how Lean has been surprisingly quiet through all of this. He's at the center of this global AI race, but we don't really know what his motivations are or what his long-term plans are for DeepSeek and China's role in the future of AI.
It's true, he's a real enigma, and that just makes his story even more fascinating.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here with Ling-Fen Wang? He comes out of nowhere, builds a company that shakes up Silicon Valley, then becomes China's AI leader. It's almost hard to believe.
It really is a story full of twists and turns. But what I find most interesting is that it makes us rethink some of our assumptions about where innovation comes from, how it's encouraged, and who benefits from it. It also makes us face the fact that AI is quickly becoming a tool for countries to compete with each other, which could have major effects on the global balance of power.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, honestly, a bit overwhelming, but one thing's for sure, Ling-Fen Wang and DeepSeek are a force to be reckoned with. And if we zoom out even further, Ling's story raises a much bigger question. What happens if DeepSeek succeeds in pushing AI towards AGI? What does that mean for humanity as a whole?
That's the big question, isn't it? We're talking about potentially creating a form of intelligence that could be as smart as, or even smarter than humans. It's both exciting and a little scary.
Absolutely. Does Ling's open source approach offer a more responsible way to develop technology? Or will it end up being exploited by those who want power and profit? These are questions we can't answer right now, but they're questions we need to be asking. Ling-Fen Wang and DeepSeek have challenged not just Silicon Valley, but the entire world. They've shown us that the future of AI is full of uncertainty, and the rules are changing right in front of us.
This deep dive has just scratched the surface of this complex and rapidly evolving story. It's a story that deserves our attention, our critical thinking, and our active engagement.
So to our listener, I encourage you to keep digging, keep exploring, and keep asking those tough questions. Ling-Fen Wang's story is just one part of the much bigger story of AI and how it will affect humanity. And trust me, this story is far from over.